Welcome back to the Books Brothers podcast, the show where longtime friends spread across the country reconnect over the pages of a good book. Each episode, we dig into what we're reading, share our thoughts, debate a little, and of course, laugh a lot. Whether you're a die-hard bookworm or just here for the conversation, welcome. I'm Garrett.
I'm Thomas.
I'm Flez.
And I'm Rob.
Guys, here's something crazy. We are in Season 8. This time, we're diving into the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by John Gottman. But we're shaking things up a bit. We'll still do our usual recaps and discussions, but this season, we're rolling out segments. We'll poke fun at our age, and since we're talking about marriage, we'll even try to bring our wives into the mix. And perhaps best of all, based on the overwhelming feedback we've received, ads are back, baby. I'm pumped to try this new format. So let's jump right in. So as millennials, we've officially hit that stage where we get nostalgic about the good old days, the 90s. So we're going to kick it off with a segment this season called They Don't Make 'Em Like They Used to. Rob, this was your idea for this segment. Why don't you tell us what you think we should all talk about? What do they not make like they used to?
Technological fails. You know, back then they were big back then. They were revolutionary. You remember the time we were all convinced that this was the future of communication? Beepers. Everyone thought being paged with numbers was high tech, but all it meant was that you were dying to get to a payphone to call someone back. Like, hey, I got a 911, but I'm on a subway. You're going to have to wait for me to find a phone booth to call you back. Dial-up internet. The sound of dial-up like a haunted house mixed with a spaceship trying to take off.
Well, when did you guys actually get a PC, like a home computer? Like what era was it? Because for us, it wasn't until I think 95 or 96, and we hit the Windows 95 pretty hard right off the bat.
I feel like my dad was always an early adopter. I remember it. I actually have a visual memory of it at our first house. So I would have been younger than 5. So yeah, probably around 94.
Really?
Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
we were later. I think we were like 3rd, maybe 4th grade. I don't know, which would have put us at like 97, 98. But I remember specifically being in daycare and we knew that we were going to be getting internet that night. And it was like a big deal. And they loaded up some bowling game that was like, it took place in the frozen era, and you were like polar bears or something, and you were bowling into polar bears. Like, I don't know.
You should find these games and play them. I remember. Do you remember the Windows Pinball? That was a great one.
There were some good ones for
I
sure.
heard that a lot. Honestly, as a kid, I never got on the internet because it was so boring, because the internet was so slow. I just played PC games that came on CD-ROMs and stuff like that.
Remember Age of Empires? Y'all ever play that?
Oh, yeah. Great one.
Learning what the cheat codes were. The Chevy Cobalt. No. It was not the Chevy Cobalt. Gosh, what was it? The Ford. It was in Ford versus Ferrari. Anyways, where you just had this car that shot cannonballs. That was my favorite. But yeah, man, I remember you'd get on the home phone and it would just be busy. So, I can't make a phone call because got to wait for mom or dad to get off the internet. Pretty wild. Yeah. You had to make sure no one else was on the phone and holler out, "Hey, I'm going to get online." Announce yourself.
My dad was a software engineer, so we had computers early on. But my first memory of the internet is using Napster to download a bunch of illegal music.
LimeWire. I use LimeWire sometimes.
Napster was the OG, though.
Yeah, Napster was probably earlier.
I think that was when dial-up was still a thing. Even. It's funny to think about.
I really didn't get online that much. Probably until like break and YouTube started becoming more popular, because you guys know I'm all about the videos.
Oh yeah, maybe there's something to that where you slow down the internet connection, you make it to where only one person can use it at a time, not spending as much time wasting time on the internet late at night and doing nefarious activities.
Yeah,
bring it back. They don't make it like they used to.
Bring back dial-up.
What was your guys' AOL names? Do you remember?
Football Freak with 2 E's, 0701. Football Freak 0701.
Dang. Mine was Scorer 23.
Like you were scoring like art or
No,
soccer?
like a soccer score, like scoring goal.
I assumed.
I didn't actually have one. I
Mine
was
was
not.
just-
You didn't have aim?
Mine
I
was
didn't
just
have any
ad.
friends for AIM, I guess.
Mine was just ad flies, but my Hotmail email address was bbplayer100 at hotmail.com.
Let's
I
go.
remember that.
Dude, let's go. BB player.
Yeah,
Is that
it was
BB
like,
for basketball?
like, oh, sorry, BB player 1000 has already been used. Okay, BB player 1001 already used. You're up to like BB player 1274.
Yeah, it was probably like middle school for me. My mom had opened a savings account, like a savings, with a bank. I don't know why I'm having trouble talking. And I remember having to call customer service for an issue, resetting my password or something. And that was, I just went with that username or email, and I'll never forget. It was the first sign to me that I needed a more professional sounding username, because I'm waiting on it. He's like, yeah, let me access your account. There's a little silence. He goes, so what's your favorite football team? And I go, what? Like it just came out of nowhere. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, your username's football freak. So I thought to myself, yeah, I should probably get a more professional sounding name as I get older. If you're listening, let us know what you think about dial-up internet. If you grew up in that age, if you think we should go back to it, or if there's something else that you just really have a lot of nostalgia for, because they don't make them like they used to. All right, as we transition now into a little bit more of the actual book content, we're going to kick off the book, but this next segment is called The One Thing. So a key takeaway that we should walk away from today. But since it's episode 1, we're going to hear from Stehlin about why he chose this book. He recommended it to the group. So Stehlin, what makes 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work a must read for the book club this season?
Yeah, so sorry I had to miss out on the call this week, guys. But yeah, I'm really excited to read The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by John Gottman. Read this book a couple years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, and it's been one of the more referenced books that I would say that I have come across in my personal marriage. It's been one that I feel like I've talked to individuals in the counseling world. They've recommended this book, and a lot of other just friends that have spoken well of this book about how it's really benefited their marriage, helped them understand themselves better, as well as understand their spouse. And so I'm really excited to read it. It's a little bit different than the last couple books that we've done. So, being that, most of us here are married men or trying to become married men, I'm really looking forward to diving into this book and hopefully becoming better people at being married.
All right, thanks, Stehlin. Yeah, I've read this myself, and this is the best marriage book I have ever read. So I'm thrilled that we're reading it again. I was telling that before we hopped on the call today that I'm stoked to. If there's a book to read a second time, it's this one. Yeah, so for future episodes for The One Thing, we'll have one of the guys share how he applied the previous week's discussion to his life, and bonus points to whoever is able to get his wife to join and share her perspective as well. It's really, really hard to focus. What is going on? How are you moving like that?
I just needed to lower my desk.
That was incredible. All right.
Sorry. I was getting uncomfortable standing up. Ergonomics.
Now let's actually get into the book itself. We read chapters 1 through 3, but before we get into this discussion, we need to take a break to hear from a word from today's sponsor, ZapTrack. So fellas, be honest. How many times has your wife said, "You're not even listening," and you truly had no clue what she just said? Well, fear no more. Introducing ZapTrack, the world's first brain implant technology that detects when you're mentally checked out and gives you a gentle, loving, but also mildly painful electrical shock. The moment you start daydreaming about fantasy football, ZapTrack zaps you back to reality. Stay engaged, stay married, and most importantly, stay alive. Because, what did you say? Is not the right answer. Zap track. Because happy wife, shock-free life. Side effects may include improved communication, fewer couch sleep nights, and a sudden appreciation for throw pillows. Not responsible for marriages ending due to excessive truthfulness.
That's
Throw
good.
pillows.
I like that one.
All right. Now for the main reason we're here. Let's talk about the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by John Gottman. We decided to take one episode to go over the kind of, I wouldn't call them introductory chapters, but there's 3 chapters prior to the actual 7 principles. The first principle is in chapter 4. So we read chapters 1 and 2, and we're just going to kind of go through a quick recap of each one and talk about them. So chapter 1, Gottman kind of paints the picture for his love lab in Seattle, where he's based. And chapter 1 is just that. He talks about what the truth about happy marriages is. He gives an overview about his research on marriage and explains how he and his team have studied thousands of couples to identify patterns that predict marital success or failure with remarkable accuracy. Using scientific observation, he found that happy marriages are not built on avoiding conflict, but rather on how couples handle disagreements and maintain positive interactions. The chapter debunks common myths about marriage, such as the idea that compatibility is key, and instead emphasizes the importance of small, everyday moments of connection. Through his research, Gottman discovered that successful couples cultivate a strong foundation of friendship, respect, and emotional intelligence, setting the stage for the 7 principles that follow in the book. And the myths were particularly intriguing to me, so I wanted to ask you all, what myth about having a happy marriage did you believe in the most? From the book, they were neurosis or personality problems ruin marriages. The second one he shared was common interests keep you together. Third one is you scratch my back. And the fourth one, avoiding conflict will ruin your marriage. So he said that's a myth. Another one, affairs are the root cause of divorce. Another one, men are not biologically, quote, built, unquote, for marriage. And then the last one that he shared, there are more he alluded to, but the last one he shared is men and women are from different planets.
I'm not sure if this falls into the category of any specifically described in the book, but I guess earlier, before college or during college, before I had really gotten into like a super long-term relationship that I could see kind of marriage in the future, I had imagined that it required a lot more sacrifice that would feel uncomfortable personally than it actually did. Because a lot of sacrifice when you're married to somebody and you enjoy them for the most part, your friends, you're actually kind of happy to do it because you can see the positive outcomes that whatever it is you're sacrificing sort of results in. And typically, if it's positive for the relationship, you kind of get used to that small sacrifice and kind of accept it as a necessary thing that makes everything better. So I guess I just assumed that, based on the way people talked about it and popular culture, there would be more negative feelings associated with some of those sacrifices, those small things.
I think for me, the one that stuck out was common interests keep you together, being a myth. Sarah and I have been laughing about that one lately, or did. The first couple times we went to the gym together, I get in a very different headspace when I'm at the gym. I become very focused and my attention is to what I'm doing there. And so if it's like an activity where you're a couple and you're going to do this thing together, for me, that's one that's hard to separate my strong attentive behavior towards lifting weights and being in a relationship with this person.
Yeah, I mean, hey man, the weights need attention too.
Yeah, but I just get in a different headspace when I'm in the gym. It's not the boyfriend headspace. It's the I'm here to get a shit done headspace. And it's not really conducive to we're enjoying an activity together, if that makes sense. And so, but now she knows that about me, and she knows how my brain works, and we communicate well about that. So we can go to the gym together and have fun. But I just thought that was an interesting thing. It's like, I think he uses the example of like two people enjoying kayaking, but they go together and they get in fight. It's like, just, if they're fighting while they're both doing something they both enjoy, that takes away the point of the thing that they're interested in. And if they can't enjoy the activity together because they're competing against each other, it's like defeats the purpose. So maybe they shouldn't do that activity together. But I thought that one was interesting. I always thought like, oh, the girl I'm with has to go to the gym with me, and it's not necessarily the case. So
we both like working out, but I feel like we've moved in and out of seasons where it just doesn't make sense because of either our schedules or our goals. So it's like sometimes working out together has been a joy, and sometimes it's like you're trying to force it to work when it just shouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just frustrates everyone if you try to force it,
Yeah.
Rob?
Yeah. I think one of the ones.
Rob, do you need the zapper, dog?
Maybe. Yeah. If you have conflict, your marriage is in trouble. Obviously, like everybody knows that it's not going to be sunshine and roses 100% of the time. For my wife and I, it's like, I think we walk away always becoming closer whenever we have conflict. And that typically brings us together more than it does separate us apart. Just it recognizes the team component too, that at the end of the day, like, we are a team and we want to come together and learn and understand where each other is coming from. And, there's a continuous improvement component of wanting to love each other better and how do we show up for each other. And I think it's unreasonable for people to think that if you have a fight here or there, if you have conflict, that means you're doomed, right? I mean, that's a pretty immature way of thinking on that.
Yeah.
But I once, I don't know if this fits in here, but somebody once told me that getting married younger, I'm curious what you guys think on this. Getting married when you're younger kind of helps you both form into like who you are together, because and like maybe I don't know, there's less friction because when you're younger, you're like lesser of an adult. And so you both are kind of like figuring out who you are as you're like growing in your relationship together, where you take like me, where I was 31 when I got married. So I had a lot of like stuck in my ways and rigidity, and there was more like could be more friction and like, no, this is how I've been living for the past decade. Like, this is, it's harder for me to unlearn those things at 31 versus if I had gotten married at 22, And so, I mean, I know Garrett and you got married at a young age, and Flez and Thomas as well. I think you guys are probably closer to that than me, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally changed my worldview between the time I was like 20 and 30 in a lot of ways. So, if you have somebody, but the thing is, if you both change in the opposite direction, it could mean the opposite, right? So like part of me agrees with that. Part of me is like, well, as long as you change together and you both agree on a lot of these things that you're changing on that are good, that's the right direction instead of the wrong direction, it could definitely be easier, because people do tend to get stuck in their ways as they age, I guess.
Yeah, this is I have seen it from both scenarios, having been married to my high school sweetheart and then divorced and then dating and in a serious relationship at 33. I think for me, it's just different. It's like, we did, like, I didn't know what life was like without that person. So yeah, we grew our life together from when we were young. But I think that some of the issues there, though, are like, you don't really get to know who you are as an individual. And like when you're older, I feel like you tend to be a little bit wiser and have a better idea of who you are, and maybe might make a better decision. But that's not always the case either. It's like, it's not like a blanket statement on what's going to work and what's not going to work. But I know for me personally, I feel like I'm much more, I've learned more. I've made more mistakes. I've learned from all this stuff, and I'm way more emotionally intelligent than I was when I was married in my younger 20s, like I used to stonewall. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit. But like the things that I struggled with in my marriage are things that I know I struggled with, and like I don't repeat them at all now, but that's because I have the knowledge that I didn't have when I was younger. So it's like, the relationship that I'm in now is just, it looks completely different because of all that knowledge. And I don't know. It's interesting thing to think about.
That's a good question, Rob.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's a right answer necessarily, but because to get married when you're super young, like you still have a lot of growing up to do, and you're going to do that growing up together. But does that take away from like your individuality in that too? Obviously you're married, you're two become one, right? So like, but you still have the individuality component as well. Like you're never not going to be just Thomas, Adam, Rob. Like you are still a person too.
I bet John Gottman would have a good informed opinion on it.
What are your thoughts, Garrett? I know you were going to share about the myth too.
Oh, what myth? Going back to that.
Well, or if you wanted to answer the question.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I have much more to add other than we have some coworkers getting married here and there at my current job. And it is a weird thing for me to think about being in my professional life, my fiance being in her professional life, and then joining that, because you do have years of independence after college where you learn a lot about yourself. You have a job, potentially a good one. And to me, I was a year out of college, but I was in the nonprofit world and had fundraised my own salary, and I wasn't making a lot and didn't have a lot. And then when we got married, she had just graduated college. So it really did feel like we became adults together.
Yeah.
And part of me likes that because we didn't know anything else. We just only know adulthood, helping each other out through that. And it does feel weird to think about if I had gotten married at 27 or 28 and had 4 or 5 years of independent living. That could have been quite an adjustment, especially because I'm a pretty independent person. Almost maybe it could have been a harder adjustment. I don't know. But
yeah, I think probably so, like you're saying. But what was your myth?
The "you scratch my back" one. We've actually talked a lot about that in counseling. So we've gone to marriage counselors at various times in our 10 and a half years. And we have been seeing one now in Oklahoma City for about a year and a half. We didn't see it. We saw her for the first time a couple weeks ago after like 4 months off. And she's commented on that a lot, where our marriage can sometimes be a courtroom where we are kind of keeping tally of who did what and providing evidence to back up one's opinion, kind of thing. And it's just not, you just can't do that in marriage. There's times when one person's going to pull more weight than the other and vice versa. And there's got to be grace and understanding and support. So I think, and I've also learned just how I tick too, is with Brooke being in, the career she's in, there's just been a lot of times where she's had to fully focus on her work, and I've had to take care of a lot more of things domestically, financially, parentally, if that's a word. And the scales are not necessarily balanced equally on a spreadsheet. And I'm actually fine with that. A big key for me is not, hey, I've done 20 things, I need you to do 20 things now. Some of it is just genuine appreciation and admiration, just a kind word or something like that. So I've learned that it's not helpful to have that perspective of the scales need to be balanced, because they won't always, if ever, be, based on different life scenarios, jobs, parenting, right? Like one is literally, like Brooke is carrying the child, growing the child right now. I can't do anything. You know what I mean? So that was a myth that I had gone into marriage with.
Garrett, does that kind of roll into the same behavior? Because I've dealt with this before, where it's like, I really like it when people tell me X, Y, or Z. So I'm going to tell my spouse X, Y, or Z in hopes that she reciprocates that action. I'm not going to tell her that's what I want. I'm just going to do that more often for her. And she should just know that.
You got to be direct at that point, right?
Well, I know, but early on, I feel like we both did that sometimes, where it's like, you don't want to bring something up and be too direct because you're scared for some reason. So you just like act in a way that you hope will be reciprocated, and then maybe get frustrated if it's not. But
For
I don't know if
sure.
anybody else, that
Oh,
might just
yeah.
be like growing closer to the person that you're with and trying to feel them out. I don't know.
Oh, totally. What comes to mind on that is just what I was saying, the words of affirmation or whatever, the
Yeah.
words of encouragement, appreciation, whatever. To me, I sometimes view like domestic duties. And when I say that, I mean like there's that word duty again.
Got him.
I just mean like making a meal for the family or doing the laundry or something. And for me, I view that as more so. It's not like I'm not grateful or don't say thank you. I view that more as, hey, these are like basic functions of maintaining a house. So if I do them, if I do the laundry, I don't necessarily care too much about individual thanks, but Brooke does. So for me, I like there were times when I wouldn't thank her outright or not just say thanks as I walked by, but I learned I needed to give a genuine like, hey, I thanks for taking the time to do that. I really appreciate you serving or something like that. Whereas me, I'm not that way. And but in other ways, I do really want words of gratitude in other situations. So it's definitely a matter of learning how the other person ticks and how
Garrett,
they
what's your ace in the hole family dinner you like to make?
ace in the hole.
The one
Oh
that
man,
just slaps every time. Everybody's loving it. What is it, dog? What do
gosh.
you throw? What do you throw down?
I don't know if I have a go-to, but this is probably cheating because I don't have to do anything, but a really healthy meal that tastes really good that involves little work to do, with two full-time working parents is like some seafood, like salmon or something like that, or some shrimp.
You
You
fancy?
just like you get home, you put the shrimp on the stove, you get the rice ready, get some sort of sauce, put it all together. Kids love shrimp or like salmon. You just put that raw slab down on the platter and stick it in the oven, let it bake.
Nice,
You know what it
very
is.
good. What do you think, Fles? What do you
Slap
think?
those omega
Does it?
3 fatty acids.
Yeah. What do you think about those omegas, Fles?
Gotta get them.
Hey,
Gotta get them.
I remember us in college, like we'd be taking whey protein, and then we'd make sure we had our fish oils and our flaxseed oils.
we hit some hyphy
You
mud.
did that in college?
No, dude, chia seeds. You remember those?
Yeah, cheese,
Oh
and we had
gosh.
chia seeds. We'd take stock and inventory of just all the healthy things we were doing for ourselves.
Look at you. I was
Yeah,
still eating
chia
that college
seeds.
unlimited meal plan. I wasn't on your guys' level yet.
Well, it's
Chia
just funny
seeds.
because
I
it's like
mean,
I had $800 to my name, and it's the fact that I cared about taking fish oil it's just kind of funny.
Fles and Rob and I used to go to that main grocery store, and we would buy like one of the pallets of eggs sometimes, and just like cry over the fact that it was $12 back then or whatever the heck it was. Like it was so expensive, and now eggs are like $12 a piece. They don't make them like they used to.
Hey. All right, let's move to chapter 2, titled What Does Make Marriage Work? So Gottman gives kind of a high overview of what does make marriage work, as the title implies. And he emphasizes that lasting relationships are not built on avoiding conflict, but rather fostering a deep sense of friendship, admiration, and emotional connection. So he introduces this thing called PSO, positive sentiment override, and then its counterpart, negative sentiment override, or NSO, where it's like kind of like the easiest way I can describe it is your subconscious, your baseline view of your spouse, so that when something happens, in this case, probably like something that could cause conflict or tension, if you have a PSO, you have what Brooke and I would say is you're believing the best about that person. So if someone's overreacting or said something harsh to you, you kind of have your positive sentiment, your natural reflex reaction towards your spouse. You think positively, like, okay, must just be having a bad day. And then on the other end, the NSO is, if you kind of don't have that view, then you can really take that and grow in your resentment and bitterness and anger. And so that was something that really stuck out to me, is the PSO, the NSO, and then building up the your sound relationship house, where, it's you're building a house together. Sometimes you think of that as like a physical house, but in your marriage you're building a figurative house, laying brick by brick, and the foundation of that is trust and commitment. So without all these 7 principles that he's about to lay out, if you don't have trust and commitment towards one another, it's going to be hard to build that sound relationship house. So going to specifically to positive sentiment override, how have you seen PSO and negative sentiment override, NSO, impact your marriage? And if you've experienced NSO, how did you combat it?
I think I'm worse than my wife is about just assuming that maybe there's some bad intentions when there's not. Like maybe perceiving things sometimes when I feel like having a bit of a pity party. I think this is more of a manly response to having, some sort of resentment about a situation, would be kind of the me against the world attitude, where anybody who tries to help doesn't understand, or just like, I have to do it by myself, or, I don't know. I guess I've dealt with that, and kind of after the argument or after the kind of emotions go away, realize like I was the one probably driving the NSO more so than anybody. I would say, yeah, it's definitely a thing though. The PSO, when you guys just both give each other the benefit of the doubt, kind of stops a lot of arguments in its tracks, because you don't react to things the way that you would when you're in more of an NSO situation.
My relationship right now is still pretty early on, so it's obviously not all PSO, but mostly. I mean, there's conflict, which is good because I don't avoid conflict anymore. We just address it. But I think one thing that we do well is definitely, or a few things, are like showing gratitude, building admiration, and like intentionally responding positively to like bids for connection. I think that's huge. It's just like you can recognize these bids that your person is trying to give to you to connect. I feel like when NSO is just like overwhelming, you just like don't even respond to bids.
You don't even register.
Bids?
Yeah, like an attempt to connect. What did you guys first think when you heard the term love lab? The love lab. I was like, hold up, wait a minute. What are we talking about here?
I mean, it feels like those Love is Blind or those reality TV shows. Like this is essentially that,
Yeah.
Like there's people studying, what was it, Married at First Sight?
Married at First Sight. Oh gosh, that's a great
90 Day
guilty
or,
pleasure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They had all these counselors on there, like studying them, and that's kind of the thought I got. But I don't know. Going back to the PSO thing, it's like I feel for me that I don't really know that I get into the negative NSO as much. I just try and, I know my wife is working tremendously, just doing everything that she loves, and it's really cool to support her. It means that she has crazy hours. It means that she's doing photo shoots during the day, or a wedding on the weekend, but then also performing, and then dealing with our old dog, and all these things. So it's just like, I know that she's, any lack of energy she has is because she's just working really, really hard, and I respect her and everything that she does for our family. And I tend to just know that, I give her the benefit of the doubt if she's super tired and maybe is short-tempered with me because she's just tired on sleep. It's just like trying to give her the benefit of the doubt versus like, gosh, you don't have any time for me, or you don't blah, blah, blah. You're showing up poorly. It's like, that would be disregarding, like her feelings and her energy. And I recognize everything that she does like that.
I think it's easy for both, say both parties are feeling stretched thin in one way or another, I think it's easy for both parties to get into an NSO situation because they already don't feel like they're either rewarded or recognized for all of the stuff they are doing. I mean, I think there's a lot of couples out there that in this modern world are both basically stretched to the max with the amount of time that they have to accomplish all their tasks, let alone spend time together that's meaningful. And I think that puts anybody close to being in a negative sentiment override state. So it's kind of hard to stay that way if you're being stretched thin in any capacity.
Yeah, I think just NSO is something I struggle with a lot. It's a pretty big deficiency, I would say, because it's amplified in marriage, but I recognize it in a lot of areas of life where I just kind of have a default, like maybe the easiest way to describe it is like a me against the world mindset. Something happens and I immediately go to the, I don't know, worst case scenario, maybe not necessarily, but just thinking the worst side, like, oh, she probably wasn't being thoughtful. And I was like, no, I was dealing with a screaming child or something like that, whatever the example is. But I will say too, and again, this is something that we've talked about and it's actually been expressed, but I think there's actually been legitimate hurts where, I mentioned earlier, like being appreciated or feeling valued was not the case. So I think there has been, for lack of a better way to say it, legitimate reason to have NSO, if that makes sense, because there actually has been hurt, there actually has been wrongdoing. But the problem is that I can struggle with forgiveness, grace. You know what I'm saying? So there has been times where, yeah, we've shared with each other, or Brooke shared with me, like, yeah, I did not care about you. I did not value you. I was just trying to get through school or this residency month or whatever. And I like felt it, but it was like a good thing to hear it as much as it like sucked to hear, because it's like, yeah, those, there's just, marriage is tough and, we're not perfect towards one another. So there were some times where it was like, oh yeah, I'm believing the worst, because sometimes that has been the case. But then recognizing like, oh, when someone says they're sorry or when you apologize, you want to be believed that you're being genuine and trying to change. And so how have we combated it? How have I combated it? It's been a lot of having conversations, going to counseling. Chapter 3, the last chapter before getting into the first of the 7 principles, is how I predict divorce. So how the author predicts divorce through all of his studies and his groundbreaking ability to predict divorce with over 90% accuracy based on his research in the Love Lab. Gottman describes 5 signs of a marriage heading for divorce. 1, a harsh startup. 2, the 4 horsemen. 3, flooding. 4, body language. And 5, failed repair attempts. So the sign 2, the 4 horsemen, are 4 types of negative interactions: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So which one of the 4 horsemen do you struggle with the most in your marriage? And if you're willing to share, which of these 5 stages have you experienced in your own marriage? And yeah, how'd you respond to the 4 horsemen, to those 5 stages? What was the result? A few different questions there.
Well, I'll say that I get flooded fairly easily. I'll admit that. Like in conflict, I get very overwhelmed pretty easily. Like
And
I would be
just for context, he measured flooding a lot of times with
heart rate,
actual biological measurements, right? So how
yeah,
would you
blood
describe
pressure.
it? Like when you feel floods, how would you describe that?
Well, he talks about how it's more normal for men because, like, it's like a biological thing. Like when women are better at calming themselves because of biology.
Yeah.
They want to stay calm, whereas men are primed to attack. It's not exactly helpful in a situation where you're trying to have a conflict resolution between like a 21st century romantic partnership. It's not helpful for
Men were
blood pressure
when
increases and stuff like that.
men like evolve to want to punch drywall and throw slippers when they get flooded.
Well, flooding is physically and psychologically shutting down, right?
Flooding is getting overwhelmed, so then you shut down. Yeah, it can lean to like it can lead to stonewalling. So
No, I thought stonewalling could lead to flooding.
stonewalling, no,
Could be both. Could
I
be
guess it
both.
could
I mean,
be
flooding
either.
is really just like an overwhelming sense of emotions. You could either shut down, or you could like attack, say a bunch of stuff you don't mean. I think it could be
Mm-hmm.
both, right?
I
Stonewalling is
understood stonewalling as like disengaging from the moment, but the flooding is like not only have you disengaged, but now you're totally shutting down.
No, I think flooding's more just about emotions and not being able to control yourself. I think stonewalling is like actively making the decision to just ignore the situation and not face whatever's happening. That's
like
how
you
I
won't
took
you
it.
won't even acknowledge your spouse. Essentially, is what like stonewalling is.
I actually learned about flooding reading a parenting book, believe it or not, because I was learning about how to help my kids regulate their emotions, and how I learned it from a child's parenting standpoint is we have different parts of our brain that operate different functions, and when the emotions set in, so a kid gets upset, right? My son gets upset that I won't let him have dessert. The emotions side of his brain floods or like takes over the whole brain. So the other part of the brain that can make logical decisions is not active. And so what that looks like in practicality of a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old is like, what happened yesterday? Hey, it's time to go eat, or it's time to go get dressed for school. No, I don't want to. I want to keep reading. It's like, sorry, it's time to go. And just like, he's like on the ground crying. It's like, hey, we kind of go through our routine, and hey, we're going to lose privileges if we don't obey and get dressed. And like, basically he took a small thing, and then it just gets bigger and bigger because he's flooded. He's not able to stop. And so we try to help him stop and regulate. There's times also where it's like, hey, you got to learn to just obey, dude, and not, you're too old to throw in temper tantrums. But as adults, we do the same thing. We may not be rolling around on the floor, but we can be upset like I was tonight. And it's like, yeah, that's not like a logical decision. I should just walk away. Let's talk about cooling off. Big proponent of walking away when upset, taking a break, taking a time out. I think he's already talked about that in the book. Literally resetting and calming down, letting those emotions deflood, if you will.
It's a repair attempt. Walking away.
Come back to center. Talk about a myth, a Christian myth. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. I think that's just misinterpreted. Sometimes the best thing is to go to bed, because you wake up, like your mind literally like rests and resets, and you wake up. It's like, oh, the thing I was mad about wasn't that big of a deal. Or if it is, and it still needs to be talked about, you're actually calmed down and rejuvenated to have that conversation.
Yeah.
It's funny because I love trying to go to bed to reset myself, but it's also a form of stonewalling. So it's like kind of unfair. And then my wife will be like, "We're just not going to talk about this." And I'm like, "We'll feel better in the morning. We'll just wake up and it'll be fine." She's like, "No, like I can't go to bed until we talk about this. Like that's really unfair. Like I'm trying to go to sleep and I'm just thinking about this." And so like, we usually have to talk about it. But yeah, I kind of try to make that argument, even though it's a form of stonewalling, and I acknowledge that. I will say the failed repair attempts is one that I feel like I sometimes, when people have like want to have the last word, they'll pretend at the end of an argument to be like, "Okay, all right, you were right about this stuff. Like I agree. Let's just get over this problem and this argument's over now." But like I kind of had a point, right, when I blah blah blah, and then they try to like sort of justify everything all over again, where it's like a half-ass repair attempt. I feel like I've done that multiple times, and it just turns into like this revolving door of like opening up the argument again so that it can go in another circle. And I feel like a lot of couples probably do that, I would assume.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to that. And the stonewalling and the flooding for sure. I'm thinking back to like a couple months ago, we were driving somewhere, and we got into a disagreement or a fight, and it had been going on for probably like a half an hour. We had like a 3-hour drive, and I remember I just completely shut down, and we probably didn't say anything for 15-20 minutes, just looking ahead driving. And it's like at that point I don't even know what we were fighting about. Like I'm genuinely like serious that I couldn't like rehash it because I had just completely shut down, and I couldn't pick back up where we had left off, and it's scary, that your body can like get to that point where, I mean, I pride myself on my memory, but in some of these fights, it's like I couldn't tell you what we fought about, like I couldn't explain it to a third party.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's happened to me before.
She can remember.
Oh yeah, she'll tell you all about it.
And I'm not saying that's
you
good,
can't tell her. You can't tell her. So you like you need her to tell you, like, what were we fighting about?
like can you
She won't
rehash
believe
it
you if
for
you
me
say it.
so
So
I
it's
can,
like, yeah.
understand what, like, where, like, what are we like how what are we fighting about again? Like, help me understand.
Why am I mad at you?
It's just it's weird. It's weird. I think the repair attempts have definitely helped at times. I know they talked about it in chapter 2 as well, about like doing something silly. There's a song, that celebrate me home. You know that song?
Sing more of it.
Ugh. Basically, there's a song that I butcher how to, like, the words to it every time, and I sing it really, really high. And if I sing that song at any point, Marianne just dies laughing. So, like, that's my repair attempt.
I like it when we mock each other in each other's voice, but of course our voice that we mock each other with is totally like unlike our actual voice. And then we make fun of each other's impression, and then it's just funny because it's like, oh, is that really how I sound?
When I think of walling, I wonder what you all think about this. I think of part of the reason that men might do it more often of stonewalling. I think you said 85% of the time it's men. I think it's from emotional unintelligence, perhaps, where we haven't learned how to express and talk about how we're feeling. So because we're upset or hurt, it's like, hey, I'm just gonna, I don't know, like, and I'm also competitive. Maybe this is just me, but I always want to like win an argument or be the better person. I don't know. So if I stonewall, if I don't react by like yelling back or saying, saying something harsh or whatever, and just like, I'm tough enough, I can take this pain, I can bury it deep down.
I can outwork you at this argument.
Yeah, I think it's just more of like,
I've got the stamina.
This is my cross to bear or something. And so I'm just going to remain silent.
I can tell you exactly for me why I stonewall. It's because of impatience. Like if it takes me 10 words to express my feelings about the situation and it takes you 600, I'm just so ready for it to be over. Like I'll just, come on, like let's just end this now. I don't really care how we end it. I'm just done. And, after like the 4th time listening to the feelings, I'm just like, all right, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Doesn't matter to me anymore. But that doesn't resolve it because you're checked out. It's obvious you don't care at that point. It's not a good strategy. But yeah, I think for sure men don't have the capacity to just, I think, either listen as well and like absorb things as well from an emotional standpoint, or the stamina to talk about them for, hours on end.
I think for me, it's physiology for sure, because I am very emotionally intelligent, but it doesn't matter when you're in that moment and your body's like literally blood pressure's going up, like you're just like in shock.
You can't punch any more holes in the wall because it's just gone.
You can't deadlift 700 pounds.
There it is. There it is. I was about to say it. You took the words right out of my mouth.
I knew it. I knew it was coming.
Man, did you guys find it kind of uncomfortable, like reading some of these fights?
Yeah, I was like, some of the words were so harsh. I was like, dang, I'm glad we don't talk like that.
I mean, it almost makes you wonder, like, if someone were to document the dialogue from one of our fights, like, would they look this immature? Because, like, when you read them out, they literally seem like high school fights, you know, or things that someone that's been married 40 years.
So, well, when he was talking about the criticism versus the complaint, some of the criticisms were super harsh. I mean, like cutting to the core of who somebody was and just like demeaning them in front of their face. And it was just like, man. But
super childish.
I imagine if we did record some of our fights and then shared it to each other, we would be super embarrassed. You know, we'd be like, oh man, wow, I look like a total douche.
Yeah. So that kind of was eye-opening of just the weight of your words and just, if a neutral audience were to hear them, or even if you were to hear them, like you're saying, record them for yourself to hear, would you say those things again?
They say name calling isn't a good strategy, but what if you call somebody a silly name in order to diffuse a situation? Then is it okay, you think?
You butt sniffer.
You flowerhead. You
Probably just depends on the person.
You honey crisp apple.
Ooh. Hey, now we're getting into the romantic side of it. What's the best bad insult you've heard your kids tell each other?
They're very obsessed with going to jail if you're bad. So they're like, hey, you did that? You're going to jail.
I like it.
All right, that is a wrap on today's discussion. Thank you for joining us this week. Next week, we will read the first principle, Principle 1, Enhance Your Love Maps. We're reading the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by John Gottman. Grab yourself a copy, read alongside with us. If you've enjoyed our discussion, please share with a friend or family member who might benefit from it. Please like and subscribe on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube, and give us a review. That really helps us out. And you can follow us also on Instagram at Books Brothers Podcast. Until next week, read, reflect, and connect.